All right, so you've had a few interviews and you feel like you're just not getting over the line when it comes to landing your job. I'm gonna give you 3 secrets from my playbook that I use personally and I've advised to hundreds already that helps them get over the line and get invited for the final interview or for the job for that matter. I'm gonna help you out. Peace. Hey, it's Zaire from Live Circular and welcome to Entry Level, where I'm helping 1 million of you lot get your first jobs in tech through the advice and insights that I've gained along my career and hopefully in future some of my guests' career. In today's episode, I want to give you 3 types of questions that I've asked in interviews and I've also advised other people who have landed their first jobs and subsequent jobs, of course, through the guidance of the specific questions I'm going to give you. But here's a little pre-warning. The job market is competitive, yes. However, there are a lot of opportunities there for people that can go into the small details. So the smallest margins do make a massive difference in this game. And I believe asking the right sorts of questions can leave a long-lasting impression on the hiring managers. And that's why I want to put this video together. The second thing that I would like to add to this is it goes without saying, but if your work isn't of a good quality, as well as that your interview skills in general aren't of a good quality, I'd definitely work on those before fixating on something like this. But I hope that this podcast or this episode can help once you do get to that stage. I'd finally add that the types of questions that I'm going to give you are secrets to how I've managed to get to final stage interviews and always usually left a good impression on the hiring team. And in many scenarios, I've landed my jobs. And these sorts of questions are questions that are just so effective because they are thought-provoking. That's the main aim here. The first type of question I'd like to go over is one where you put the interview in a position where it's in between them and the company. What I mean by this is you're asking them something personal that also reflects the company and the company's culture, as well as that their own personal motives. So for instance, in this scenario, why do you keep turning up to this job every day knowing you can go somewhere else? What keeps you here? An open-ended question like this puts the person who's interviewing in, it usually takes them aback because they now have to answer a tough question. And for them, a typical responses that I've had in this scenario is the fact that leadership's really good. They trust their colleagues, they trust the company's on a good trajectory. The mission is something that they align with. These are the sorts of things that you want to hear about a company. Whereas if they struggle to answer this, I don't know, take from it what you want. The second type of question that I've got here is, what is your biggest achievement while being at this company? This is a really good indicator to understand how impactful that person's role has been and what types of impact you might be able to have when you eventually get into that company and what sort of work you can find yourselves involved in. I think questions like these, where you put the person and the company together, are really good indicators for what does the company allow people to do? What types of work are you going to do? And I think it puts people who are hiring you in a really awkward position because they have to find something really good to say. And it can't be cliche. I think a lot of the times there are cliche things that hiring managers sometimes say, stuff like, every day is different. The people are lovely. Those answers just don't suffice for such a question, I'd like to believe. And for that reason, I think that's number 1 on the list. Definitely have a question where you tackle the company and the person who's hiring you. Or it could be anyone. It could be the HR manager. It could be the design leader. It could literally be anyone. But, get to know them or at least their motives really in depth as early as possible. The second type of question I like to ask is just something a bit more personal. So I always ask personal questions because I'd like to know who I might be working with or what types of things I might have in common with those people and how I can align myself and also do their ideas or like their company culture align with the sorts of things that I'm interested in. I think these are effective questions. And one of them I like to ask is, what would you like to achieve in the next 3 years of your career? When someone answers this, I think a good indicator of the type of person they are in the company, the type of colleagues you might have, are when someone's a bit driven and they can tell you like what their path might be, what they think the company might have in store for them. And I think it's just easy to get to know someone through a question like this and find out where their ambitions are at. The second one that I would ask in this scenario is something that's just a bit random. It doesn't have to be work related when I say personal. But it could be something like, what's your favorite book and why? Um, as you can see behind me, I do read a little bit. Yeah, I do read a little bit. And it's always helpful to understand what other people's thoughts are. What type of information do they take in? Now, this sort of stuff is just for you to make a decision around like it's literally just purely people. It's about the culture and what types of colleagues you might have. I think it's a really good a way to learn where you can find some common interests. So for instance, if they don't read books, you can also ask them about what TV shows they might watch. And I've done this as the interviewee as well as the interviewer. And some amazing conversations can come up from this, especially if you found you've got some synergies with somebody and you are into, say, the same types of books, or you're into the same types of TV shows. Straight away, you're already aligning yourself and putting yourself in a position where you both see each other as someone who you might be able to get along with. I think a big part of job interviews that people do overlook is, at the end of the day, both parties are hiring each other. Is this the type of person that you could maybe sit down at a cafe, or can you have a chat with them when you're one-to-one and will it go somewhere? Do you feel happy to have these sorts of conversations? And these are the sorts of questions that I like to ask to figure out whether I align with said person. A random last question that I've got right here is, what's one thing that's important to you that you think other people should be aware of or they should be more passionate about? I like this sort of stuff. It's altruistic and sometimes it shows where someone's positive intent really is and what they believe in. I think this is also a great way for you to understand what types of people the company might hire and what types of ideas or positive things that the company might want to instill. So at Love Circular, one of the things that, we've hired for, and whenever I've asked this question, I've also answered it back as well for other people. But one of the big things is giving as much away before you leave this earth. It sounds bleak, yes, but also putting yourself in a position where you can add so much more value to others' lives through your work or through your hobbies. I think if we all had that approach in life, you can find yourself in a position where people are more just nicer to each other. And I'm not saying you have to be nice, but it makes the world a much easier place to survive in. So that's the sort of question that I'd ask. And it gets into someone's like philosophical beliefs a lot of the times. And it shows their depth of thought, which I'm all for and I'm entertained by. So yeah, that's number 2. Number 2 is personal questions. Really quick one. I hope you're enjoying this episode. If you do find it helpful and you think I'm adding value, it'd mean the world to me if you can share this video, or if you're listening to the podcast, if you could share that with somebody that you know who you think can benefit from what's being said in our podcast. But yeah, I hope you are having a good day, and we're still on a mission to get 1 million people into jobs, and I hope you can be there with me. Take care. Peace. Number 3 are questions relating to the company. So I like to ask something along the lines of, what does the next 6 to 12 months look like for the company's roadmap? And this gives you a good idea for where the company's going. A lot of the times the company won't tell you that information on the website, but it can also give you an impression on what's going to be within your job role and what you might be able to sink your teeth into. If the projects don't sound exciting, fair enough, that's on the company, but at least you've got a better idea of what you might be getting into. And I'd like to ask this sort of question because it shows, for the hiring managers or the people that are going to be hiring you, it gives you an idea of how excited they are about the company's future. The subtleties are a big thing with this sort of question. And I think if you're going to be working with someone and you're going to be spending quite a lot of time with them, it would be ideal if they were also excited about what they're doing and what they will be doing with the company. Just a thought, right? A second question I've got for this is, what advice would you give to a new starter that's going to join the company, and how do you think they can, leave a great impression on the team? Something like this, it's a very confident question to ask, yes. And I think it's a very confident question to ask, of course. But also, bearing in mind, if we've asked the same sorts of questions before and we got to this point where you ask this type of question to the hiring parties, they're going to be in a position where they now want to tell, if they like you, they'll want to tell you the things that they think are going to improve your chances. If they don't like you and they don't think you're going to have an opportunity, chances are they might try and answer this question really quickly. But if things are going in the right direction, It's a great way to get a good impression on how much they trust you, or what sorts of things would they envisage for you and your potential career with the company. So they might give you some really good advice, in-depth advice, and not generic stuff. But that's a question I like to ask. And what would I say? There's one last question which brings it back to the person, yourself, in fact. I'd definitely ask, this is a ballsy question, but it's been asked to me and I've loved it every time it's come up. It's the question of, is there anything that I've not answered correctly within this interview that you think I could elaborate on, as I'd love to leave a great impression. So simple, but it's a great way for you to gauge where their concerns could be. And if they do have concerns and they do voice them, they might say, hey, can you explain this again? We've got an idea, but we just want you to I want to see if there's a stronger answer, or if there's more to the answer that you've given. Something like that is chef's kiss. Honestly, it goes a long way, and it's impressive to know someone's that confident and they're willing to hear about their potential shortcomings when it comes to their performance in an interview. At the end of the day, I've mentioned before, an interview is really a feeling out process for both parties. If you can have that level of communication up front and put yourself in a position where you can be a bit vulnerable and they can also be very open to feedback, like you are in a good position. So those are the 3 types of questions that I'd ask. The first one, again, it's like where you wedge the person who's interviewing you between the company. You find out a little bit about both of them and how they work together. Like I said, why would you stay at this company instead of going somewhere else? That type of question, of course. The second question that I definitely look to ask will be something that's a bit more personal, just to get a better idea of what type of people you might be working with. What are they into? What are their visions? What do they like? That sort of thing. For instance, if you were being interviewed by some people that like something completely different from what you might want to be around, you've got a choice now, and at least you've got an idea. The final one is questions for the company, or about the company and how they treat their staff. I think those are very important questions, just to get a better idea, an insight of what the company's values are and how they practice them, and what the communication like top down. A little footnote that I'd add to this whole episode in itself would be, I think when it comes to interviews, asking questions, don't be afraid to have 5 or 10 questions if you really wanted. For me, I'd always say have at least 4. I'm a very curious person. So in the past, I've had an interview and then I've just flipped the interview back on them. And then once I flip the interview on them, it becomes less like I'm trying to perform for them and they also have to perform for me. And at the end of the day, there's a synergy there. And I think that's a really good experience for both parties, because it also shows your seriousness and your intentions for getting the job, and what you might be able to bring to the table and what the company might be able to bring to the table. So it's expectation management, in my opinion. And I think that's no, one more thing. When I've spoken to juniors in the past, a big thing that I've noticed are confidence. I think sometimes people are really desperate to get a job, or like they're keen on getting the job. So they'll try not to ask questions that they think might impact their ability to get the job. But I promise you, it's the complete opposite. If you exude confidence and come across that way in an interview, it does speak volumes, and other people feel it. When you're a bit more timid and you're a bit shy, it does come across, and not every interview is going to be as empathetic and understanding and appreciate that. And it's tough, but it's the reality of things. So where possible, I'd ask questions confidently and ask questions that you think are going to evoke a really good response from the hiring parties. And yeah, my name's Aya, and that's today's episode of Entry Level. Have a great one. Peace.